I've been working as a chef in one of the top restaurants in San Francisco for over 5 years now. It's a place that caters to affluent clients, where the quality of the food is always top-notch. Despite having worked in kitchens all over the city, there's something about this one that always felt off. It wasn't about the food or the service, everything was perfect. No, it was something else, a feeling in the air, a tension I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. It all started about 6 months ago when a new waiter joined us. His name was Tom. Tall, dark-haired, and with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through you. He was friendly enough, but there was something about him that was off from the very first day. He had this habit of wandering into the kitchen during service, almost like something was pulling him in. Usually it wasn't a big deal. Waiters pop in to check on orders or ask questions about the dishes. But Tom acted differently. He would stand at the far corner of the kitchen, silently watching us prepare dishes. It wasn't out of curiosity or a desire to help, he just stood there, staring. At first, I thought maybe he was just nervous or still getting used to the place, but as the weeks went on, things started to get stranger. One night, I was preparing a large order when I noticed Tom standing in the far corner of the kitchen again, his gaze fixed on a table in the dining room. He stood there, motionless, like a statue. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. He didn't even blink. "Dai, Tom," I said, louder this time. He blinked and finally turned to face me. Without an apology or any explanation, he just smiled and went back to the dining room. At first, I brushed it off as nothing, just a little strange, but nothing to worry about. But the more I observed him, the more I started to notice odd things. Plates of food coming back to the kitchen with only a small amount eaten, orders that were mixed up in odd ways. And not once but a few times I saw dishes come back to the kitchen, dishes that weren't even in that evening's orders. Then came the strange table, which had been a little earlier than usual. Tom was serving a couple of regular clients who had been coming to our restaurant for years and always seemed a bit odd, quiet, never spoke much, always on their phones. They preferred to keep to themselves. But one night I was standing by the kitchen when I noticed that the table was empty. It had been hours, and no one was there. Their plates were still there, half-eaten, and the bill had already been paid. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe they went to the bathroom or stepped outside, but they never came back. Their reservation for the next time wasn't under their name, and no one knew where they went. I tried to push it out of my mind, but then one night, after an especially grueling shift, I went into the kitchen and saw Tom standing in front of that same table, which had been empty for months. He was just staring at it, his face expressionless. "Tom, what are you doing?" I asked, walking over to him. He didn't answer. He just walked toward the back of the kitchen, his gaze never leaving mine, like he knew something I didn't. The tension kept building. I began keeping a closer eye on Tom. He rarely spoke to the other waiters, and when he did, it was always in whispers, as if he was sharing some secret. I started asking around about him, but no one knew much. He came from another restaurant, but the details were vague. And then again. That same couple booked a table for the evening, and I saw Tom escorting them to their usual spot. I kept an eye on them from the kitchen, expecting them to leave like usual, but this time, something was different. They didn't leave. At least not like before. An hour passed. Then two. I glanced around the dining room, and the table was still empty. The plates remained untouched. Tom was standing by the table staring at it, the same blank expression on his face. The rest of the staff seemed to act normal, but the atmosphere was odd. The entire dining room felt heavy. I could feel the weight in my chest, and I walked over to see what was happening. When I reached the table, I froze. The couple wasn't there. They hadn't left. They were sitting there, facing the wall. I couldn't see their faces, they were turned away. And I couldn't hear them, no, I couldn't hear them. I felt them. The atmosphere was freezing, and I became scared, as if the air was too thick to breathe. Suddenly, Tom appeared. He looked at me with that same emotionless expression he always had, and gestured for me to return to the kitchen. He didn't say a word. The strangest part? The next morning, after a sleepless night, trying to figure out what had happened, I was told that the couple had never shown up for their reservation. There was nothing in the notes, and Tom He didn't come back. Just like that couple, he disappeared. To this day, I don't understand what happened that night, and I can't shake the question. It's like a scar that won't heal, and even now, when I pass that table, I feel like someone or something is watching me from the darkness. I worked at a restaurant in Nashville that was famous for its barbecue. It was a small family-owned place, not particularly well-known, but it had its regular crowd. I was a cook, and I loved working in the kitchen. But after 6 months on the job, I began to notice some strange things. These weren't paranormal events, just something darker and more unsettling. When I first started, everything seemed normal. The restaurant was located in downtown Nashville, surrounded by other bars and eateries. The menu was mostly meat-based barbecue, ribs, chicken, all grilled over coals. We received meat shipments from local farms, as well as frozen portions from larger suppliers a few times a week. Nothing out of the ordinary. But one thing stood out to me. I noticed that some of the meat shipments were a bit unusual. We got meat from different sources, but there was one supplier whose shipments seemed odd. I first noticed it when we unloaded a delivery and I saw boxes of meat without any labeling, just white stickers with numbers on them. I asked one of the senior staff, Joe, who had been working there for years. "What's this? Meat without labels?" I asked. He looked at me, giving a half smile. "Don't worry, it's just cheaper stuff. Not a big deal," he said. I didn't think much of it at the time, assuming Joe was just making a joke, but a few weeks later it happened again. We received meat with no markings, only numbered stickers. I began asking more questions, but no one seemed to want to talk about it. They all brushed it off, and I began to feel uneasy when I noticed the quality of the meat always seemed off when we got those deliveries. Things started to get worse with the customers. At first it was rare, but it grew worse over the months. A few people started complaining about the strange taste of the meat, and some even got sick. After one such incident, the restaurant conducted a few quality checks on the products, but I realized these checks were always superficial, and no real problems were ever found. One night, as I was preparing chicken, a woman complained about the strange flavor of the meat. She couldn't quite place it, but something was off. This was the night we had received the shipment with the strange numbered boxes. I started to connect the dots, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. Then, I decided to dig deeper. I asked the supplier for documentation on the origins of the meat, and when I got a response, I was shocked. The meat came from an unknown source, funneled through a network of intermediaries who couldn't clearly explain what they were providing. I began to get a sense that something wasn't right. I decided to talk to Joe, since he'd been around for so long and must know something. I asked him directly about the meat and the suppliers. "Joe, what's going on with this meat?" I asked. He hesitated, looking down at the floor as if searching for the right words. We've been doing this for a while," he said. "We buy cheap meat to save on costs. It's not the best practice, but we need to survive. Yeah, sometimes the shipments are weird, but no one's ever really complained. Don't make a big deal out of it." But something didn't sit right with me. A few weeks later, after another customer got sick, I decided to get to the bottom of it. I began tracking the deliveries. I hid in a corner of the kitchen, watching as the staff unloaded the meat. That's when I noticed something strange. On one of the packages, there was a crumpled piece of paper with an address and a phone number written on it. I took a picture of it. The next morning, I called the number. A man answered, but when I started asking about the meat, he seemed to panic and hung up quickly. But I had recorded the number. I double-checked the address, and it turned out to be in a part of the city known for its criminal activity. I decided to check it out myself. After walking a few blocks, I arrived at a small warehouse. Inside, there were old trucks and a few people who looked out of place. They seemed nervous when they saw me. I snapped a few pictures and left. The next day, I reported everything to the police. What they found was chilling. The warehouse was part of an illegal network that processed and distributed meat and other products without proper decertification. The supplies often came from questionable sources, and some of the products were spoiled or contaminated. The meat we had been getting was not only subpar, but potentially dangerous. The restaurant was shut down and many of the staff, including Joe, were under investigation. But what happened next still haunts me. After the police arrested everyone involved, I went back to the restaurant to collect my things. As I approached the kitchen, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Inside, I saw signs of a struggle, bloodstains, and broken equipment. The supplies had been destroyed, but something still felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, even though the place was supposed to be locked up. I never found out who was truly behind the whole operation. The strange meat deliveries and the odd behavior of some of the staff were part of something much bigger than I realized. But the most unsettling thing was that I still don't know who was the true mastermind behind the whole thing.